Welcome to Judicial Dollars and Cents, brought to you by Anders Virtual CFO Services team from all across the United States. I'm John Scott, and in each episode, we'll shine a light on the financial side of the legal world, turning law firm numbers into impact-driven stories. From taxes and profitability to practice growth and leadership, we sit down with law firm innovators who are shaping the future of the profession. Let's dive in, right here on Judicial Dollars and Cents. Welcome to today's edition of Judicial Dollars and Cents. I'm John Scott, and today we're sitting down with Chip Wagar, who is a medical malpractice attorney in Louisiana and also a nonprofit founder. We're going to discuss the most crucial and misunderstood issues in Louisiana law, medical malpractice reform. Chip's going to share why Louisiana's current malpractice laws often fail injured patients and their families, how damage caps and legal barriers impact real lives, and why he's made it his mission in life to push meaningful change throughout advocacy and education. Chip, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, John, for the honor of the invitation. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And hey, before we dig into malpractice law in Louisiana and the reforms that you're pushing, can you give us your background and your origin story? How did you get to become an attorney, a malpractice attorney, and so passionate about reform?
I'm actually, I live in practice now in the New Orleans area in Louisiana in a town called Mandeville, just outside of New Orleans. I actually grew up in upstate New York in a little town called Glens Falls, New York. And, you know, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a lawyer. And I went to college in Washington at George Washington University, and then decided to come to Louisiana to go to Tulane, where I graduated law school. And for the first few decades of my life, I handled, corporate defense cases, product liability, maritime cases, things of that nature. And then about 20 years ago, I kind of wanted to do something different. And I had just a referral of a medical malpractice case to me by one of the lawyers working in the firm. And I said to myself, well, I'm a lawyer, I can learn how to do it. And I did a wonderful job the first time and got a nice settlement, and I thought I knew what I was doing. But then after that, I found out how difficult it was the hard way, like I learned most things in my life. And, but I've been doing this now for 20 years, and we've had great success. And the lessons I learned early on have stood me in good stead for my clients for most of the time. So medical malpractice is, a very small niche here in Louisiana. And I think that's true in most states. It's a very small niche practice. Most attorneys who do personal injury work don't like to do it, don't want to do it, because it requires, it's complicated usually, involves very complex medical issues in some cases, complex legal issues, and above all, a lot of risk and investment. There are no rear end collisions in medical malpractice, and you need to invest. You need to be prepared to invest a lot of money in expert witnesses and so forth. So by the time you're done, you're going to trial, you've got $50, $60, $80, $100,000 in the case. And if you lose, you don't just get nothing, you lose it all. So a lot of personal injury lawyers don't like to do it. Most of them don't. And so a lot of our work comes from referrals of from other lawyers. And that's pretty much describes, I guess, my practice these days and how I got here.
Yeah, those prepaid case costs can come back to bite you if you don't prevail in the case. And you're right, that is your money, because the client doesn't have money, or otherwise they wouldn't be in a position to sue. So for our listeners that aren't familiar, what makes Louisiana unique when it comes to medical malpractice?
Well, there are several things. Many states don't have any caps on damages for medical malpractice, but quite a number of them do. But nobody has as restrictive caps on damages as we do. For example, if you were in an automobile accident and you had a catastrophic injury, let's say your legs were amputated, or your wife or your husband had brain damage and is disabled the rest of your life, there's no caps on damages there. The defendant, assuming they can pay for it, have insurance or whatever, they pay whatever the jury or the judge awards. That's not true here in Louisiana. We've had many cases in which we've gotten $8, $10, $12 million verdicts, but they get cut down because Louisiana has a $500,000 cap on damages for not just pain and suffering, not just non-economic damages, but it includes loss of income as well. So, and what makes it even more astonishing is that the hospital, the nursing home, or the doctor that caused the injury, and you have to prove it now. You have to go prove it in court, and they're found liable for medical malpractice and a catastrophic injury. They only have to pay $100,000. Those
Wow.
limits were set. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. No other state has that. And those limits were set in 1975, John, when Gerald Ford was president. Do you remember Gerald?
I do remember Gerald Ford, and those were kinder, gentler times for all of us.
Do
We
you know?
We didn't think
Do you
so at
know
the
how much?
time.
Do you know how much a 1975 Mustang Coupe sold for in 1975? You want to take a guess?
I'm going to guess less than 10,000.
Much less, $3,850.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So, the damage cap was set in 1975, and there was no cost of living built into it and so forth. And it's stayed there for 50 years now. And it's never been, and any attempt to raise it or adjust it is fought back by, the lobbyists for the, healthcare industry and the medical profession. They, the doctors will leave the state. Our insurance will go through the roof. But the truth is, that's not the case. Alabama, another southern state, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, they don't have medical malpractice caps. And amazingly, they have doctors. In fact, many of them have, per capita more doctors than we do.
Yeah,
And
Alabama's got a ton of doctors, especially in Birmingham, where they have UAB
yes,
and the medical
yes.
facilities.
Yes, they do. And Florida has, the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville and several, 5-star medical facilities, needless to say. So it's a myth, but it's a myth that's believed by a lot of people. And the other one is that, the medical malpractice insurance premiums for doctors and hospitals and stuff will go through the roof. So somehow these other states manage to cope with it. But the truth is, you can look this up, the AMA has statistics on this, the Cunningham Group, which is a national brokerage firm that sells medical malpractice insurance. Louisiana is the top tier, most expensive states for medical malpractice insurance after 50 years of the most draconian, laws in the country. Amazing.
That doesn't make any sense at all, because if you have these caps, which the insurance companies love, the hospitals love, you would think that the premiums would be compressed. So
how can that?
What's that?
How can that be?
Right. Where's the math here? It's a balance, right?
2 points. One has nothing to do with the other. The second is that claims frequency is what drives it up in Louisiana. And that's because of another unique aspect of our law. We're not the only state that has a medical review panel process, but we're one of the very few. And what this means is for $100, you can sue a doctor or a hospital, and you don't have to prove anything. There's no screening. You don't have to show that you have a valid case. And for usually 2 or 3 years, you can take depositions, you can do all the things you do in a lawsuit, and the doctor or the hospital or the nursing home or the insurance company has to have a lawyer and pay for that and defend it. And it may not be a very meritorious lawsuit, but they still incur a lot of money. So this cheap, $100 entry. This system that we have here, this medical review panel system, leads to a lot of claims, and that have to be, and that's why it's more expensive here than in almost all states to get medical malpractice insurance.
Well, I want to get to your nonprofit and talk about how do you fight these other interests, but would that be something you'd be willing to give up? I mean, if you were the king and could make all the rules, would you give up that review board for the $100 bringing a potentially nuisance suit?
Yes, we would. In fact, we advocate that it be at least another option be made available. A lot of states that have medical malpractice restrictions, we'll say Texas, Mississippi, for example, have what's an affidavit system. So what you have to have is an affidavit or a certificate of merit that says a board certified doctor has looked at the medical record in this case, and yes, he says there's medical malpractice. If you don't have that, your case gets dismissed. It's very quick. It's very easy. Our law firm, we don't accept representation in the case unless we have a medical opinion before we file suit. But there's a lot of my brothers and sisters that throw the spaghetti up on the wall and see if it sticks with this medical review panel system. It costs money, so it's not really working for anybody.
Right. Well, it makes a lot of sense. If you have a valid case and a doctor says, yes, there's something there, then you can proceed. But otherwise, it sounds like it's just a nuisance.
Right.
So tell me about the nonprofit. We know the constituents on the other side that don't want reform. Who's behind you all, and how are you operating to try and affect reform?
John, for 20 years, I've been doing this, and I've been waiting for someone to do something about this horrible law that we have here in Louisiana. And I've waited and I've waited and I've waited, and no one did anything. It was like, that's the way it is. You'll never beat you'll never beat the medical industry. They're the most powerful. Yeah. Well, if you don't raise your hand, you're not going to get called on, And so a few years ago, I started this organization, the Patient Rights Advocacy Forum. And a number of my clients who were victims of medical malpractice joined it and agreed to serve on the board, on the board or on as officers and so forth, because we didn't want this just to be lawyers, But a lot of lawyers like me, who've seen this. I mean, I've seen a lot of tragedy, a lot, and it's really tough and to watch sometimes, and to know that their rights are so severely restricted and their lives are so profoundly affected. Anyway, this Rolling Stone started to gather moss the last couple of years, and we made some alliances. The AARP, for example, is hand in hand with us because nursing homes and seniors are particularly vulnerable to medical malpractice. A lot of people don't realize how common it is. It's the third leading cause of death in the United States.
Wow.
Behind cancer and heart disease. A lot of people, I'll give you another one. There are about 50,000 gun deaths in this country every year from suicides and homicides. There are about 50,000 vehicular deaths in this country. There are studies by Johns Hopkins and other medical institutions that place the number of deaths in the United States from medical errors and malpractice at 250 to 440,000 a year. So you put the gun deaths and the vehicular deaths together and multiply by 4, and that gets you to where the level we're at. It's common. It's much more common, and we're just talking about deaths. I'm not talking about, brain damage, paralysis, and other horrific injuries that people have sustained. It's much more common than people think, and the injuries are terrible. They're profound as much as anything. So you asked me about the organization. It's grown. We have about over 500 followers now. We will never outmoney the other side. We know that. But we've gone to individual legislators in Louisiana one by one. And amazingly, the righteousness of your cause is worth a lot, turns out. So we've recently had discussions with, leaders in the Senate and House of Representatives of Louisiana and gotten very favorable responses. So we're going to bring a bill next year to raise the cap and some other reforms with the law. And, I don't know. We don't know what will happen, but again, if you don't try, you'll never get anywhere. And we're not just hopeful, but I actually feel there's a very good chance that we will get some reform in this area, and we need it.
Okay, so if you drafted that bill right now, and I'm sure there is some draft of it somewhere, what would your goal be to raise the cap to? And is sports gambling legal in Louisiana?
Yes, it is.
It's just recently legal here in Missouri. You used to have to drive across the river and be in the parking lot in Illinois to place a bet. But
people did that.
So what would your goal be for that cap? And what would if you had to handicap it, what do you think the odds are of getting something passed?
Well, we have we do have a draft bill, and we have three major pieces to it. One is the cap. Another one is that system that we talked about. But there's a third rather draconian piece to Louisiana's, and I'll just be very brief about it. If you have a catastrophic injury and you're going to need medical care for the rest of your life, and you're 45 years old, and you have a life expectancy of another 40 years, and you're wheelchair bound, or you don't have any legs, or, you're going to need significant medical care the rest of your life. This is often a burden that the taxpayer now has to pay. Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, however, it's the taxpayer. If you get an award after you've proved negligence, after you've proved, the injuries and so forth, if you get an award in Louisiana's court for future medical care, and this can sometimes be several millions of dollars, like a baby case can be, 8-figure judgments, you got to take care of a baby its whole life. That you don't get that money. It goes to the government. It goes to a state bureaucracy in Baton Rouge who doles it out by the teaspoonful as and when they think you need it. It's like dealing with another insurance company whose goal is to, minimize and save as much money as they can. And this fund, the Patient Compensation Fund in Louisiana, has been wildly successful. Their fund is now over $1.4 billion and growing. So they're doing a hell of a job, but not for us.
They're doing a hell of a job holding on to the money.
They are, and investing it. They're great investors, So that part, that's our third part. We want to say, unless the victim or his family's incompetent and unable to manage their own affairs, then they should get the money just like any other family would in a catastrophic injury situation. So that's what our bill does. Raising the cap, we're talking 1975, $500,000 would be worth $3 million today. And that sounds like a lot of money, but not for the injuries that we're talking about.
Right.
The $500,000 cap doesn't do a thing for trivial or frivolous injuries because they fall within that cap. It hurts the worst. It hurts the absolute catastrophic injuries. People need to understand that. So we're going to do that. Handicapping it. Right now, I'd say over 50% chance to get some reform. I think the panel review system is really antiquated, and good chance that goes out. As for the other two, 50-50, maybe.
So in the bill that you're going to put forth, are the three legs of the stool independent of each other? You could get one and not two, or you could get two and not three?
They're all in the same bill, but what did Bismarck say? It's like sausage. You don't want to watch them make it, you just want to eat it. So, we have to be practical in the, system here. There's going to be opposition. We know that. And, you have to count votes, and you have to get what you can get. So, but that's our starting position. I mean, it was $500,000 was reasonable in 1975, according to the legislature. So the equivalent amount today, let them make the argument against it.
Right. Seems like a logical argument to me to just bring it to current dollars, and especially, post pandemic when things have gone up so dramatically, there's probably 30% of your growth right there. Hey, I want to switch gears for a second and talk about, when we forecast for law firms, especially PI firms, we look at the types of cases they have, the overall general length of cases. So motor vehicle accidents are quicker than med mal cases because of the limits. And, a lot of MBAs will go quickly because they'll hit policy limits and a demand letter will be sent. Do med mal cases have a shorter duration in Louisiana than they do in other states where there may not be the same cap limits?
That's a good question, and I really don't know the answer comparing it. I do practice in Texas and in Mississippi, as well as Louisiana. I would say that the length of time, I don't notice any appreciable difference among those three states. And all three of those have medical malpractice caps as compared to, say, Florida, Alabama. But I suspect they do. I suspect medical malpractice cases in a system like ours take longer than they would in another state. And the reason now, Texas and Mississippi don't use a medical review panel system. They use an affidavit system. But particularly Louisiana, the medical review panel system will stretch out a case an extra year and a half, 2 years. So that's another thing as far as law firm economics, which I know your listeners are interested in. You've got money invested in this thing. Probably our typical case resolves in 2.5 to 3 years, and in that period of time, you're putting out a lot of money. Another reason we don't have to advertise. Let's put it that way. We don't have the marketing expense.
Well, and I'm sure there's plenty of work. It's just a higher volume than if you didn't have those caps. So if you could speak to the legislature right now, make your argument as to what the human cost that they're missing. And I think you've explained it, but say it again, that government is still paying. Even because of these caps, government is then picking up disability and other claims. So what would be the argument to me, being a legislator on the other side, may be poised to vote against this bill? Convince me to vote for it.
Well, I would say, first of all, you're talking about penalizing the most vulnerable, the most helpless, the most catastrophically injured people in favor of a privileged few. An industry that's doing really, really well. Hospitals, these executives in hospitals, and I can show you some statistics on that too, because they're all nonprofit and they have, publicly we're talking CEO salaries. One here in Louisiana, he just retired, was making $9 million a year. The heads of departments were all making between $1 and $3 million a year. They're nonprofits, but they're doing really well. The medical profession is the most highly compensated profession in America, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing. You're basically you're protecting and privileging the rich and powerful, and you're taking rights away from the poor and helpless. Secondly, that's sort of a moral argument. If you're not interested in that, if you're interested in the dollars and cents, I say the same. What you just said. Someone's paying for this. There's the misery factor that the victim is paying for it, but we're paying for it too. The federal government's paying veterans benefits for veterans that have been crippled by medical malpractice, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, you name it. All the welfare safety nets are picking up the tab. And who better to pick up the tab? The person who did it or the taxpayer?
Right.
So there's that, Then there's there's just the fact that you're taking people's rights away. Any tort reform, by definition, is taking people's rights away that they would otherwise have. Why should the people in Louisiana have less rights than the people in any other state? Why should we have less rights than people in Missouri or Florida or anywhere? We should all have the same, you know? Why should an accident victim who's paralyzed get full and fair compensation, but someone who's paralyzed by medical malpractice, the wrongdoer only has to pay $100,000? I mean, it's just, this is what, in our conversations that we are having with legislators, you know, I don't care unless you're totally bought and paid for by the insurance industry or, you know, the nursing home industry, which is very powerful in this state. Then last of all, there's the deterrence effect. And in a state that has consistently ranked #1 in the worst nursing homes in the country, for example, the CMS keeps statistics on this. They rate nursing homes from 1 to 5 stars, I think. 1 star is terrible. Two stars is pretty bad. 3 is average, you know, and so forth. Louisiana, more than 60% of our nursing homes are in the 1 and 2 star category. It's a horror show. It's a horror show. It's over and over, we're ranked the worst in the country. And the reason is, you know, the deterrence factor, $100,000 just isn't that much of a deterrence factor, particularly when what's happening these days with nursing homes, you have these holding companies and investors that are, you know, buying them up now, and, you know, they're for profit. And, you know what that means. Everyone knows what that means. And so, you know, the deterrent effect of $100,000 judgment nowadays to a $4 billion a year hospital chain that owns 30 hospitals and so forth just isn't that much. Now, if you're in a state like, you know, Illinois, Chicago, and you paralyze someone and you get a $22 million judgment, you start minding the store a little bit, you know. Patient safety rises up the priority list a bit, you know, more. Here in Louisiana, you know, we're a haven for bad medicine, bad doctors, bad nursing homes, bad hospitals, because what's the worst that's going to happen to you? $100,000? You got insurance. I mean, who cares? You know,
Right.
I mean,
right.
I'm not, and I don't want to impugn the medical profession. We work with doctors all the time. We couldn't do what we're doing without the help of doctors that are willing to step up and testify and so forth. And it's a noble profession. It's a wonderful profession. And most of them are doing the best they can under sometimes very trying circumstances. And I don't for a minute want to say that, but the economics are what they are, you know. And deterrence, I mean, I'm sorry, you know, checks and balances, it does have an impact, and it has had an impact, you know. So
I'm sure there are some great medical professionals there, but it does seem to be a safe haven for a few bad apples that there's no consequence.
Right. That's right.
Hey, before I get to, I've got a couple of off the wall, off subject questions I want to ask you, but how can folks get a hold of you at your law firm and or at your nonprofit if they want to learn more?
My law firm is, the name of it is my name, Wagar Hickman, WAGARHICKMAN. If you type that in, www.wagarhickman.com, you'll get my law firm, and you'll get all our contact information right then and there. The Patient Rights Advocacy Forum, if you type that in on Google or whatever, Louisiana anyway, you will immediately get to that website, and you will get all the kinds of information that you want, including, you know, how to contact legislators. We have a page in which, you know, you can take where you live and push the button and find out who your senator is, who your representative is, and what their email is, and how to get in touch with them. And we also have a donations page, because we have a lobbyist actively working for us now. We have you know, companies producing videos and podcasts for us and so on and so forth. And it all costs money, and we would appreciate it. We'll never have the, you know, financial power that the other side has, but we have enough. We have enough. And when you combine it, I think, with the righteousness of our cause, we're going to do okay.
Right. It's not always what you have, it's how you use it. So that's great. Okay. So are you a football fan, a college football fan?
I am.
LSU?
Yes, I am.
LSU?
My daughter went to LSU, so I do follow it and all that. But I'm a Tulane graduate, and we just lost our bowl game.
But you did make the CFP.
We did, and it's a fantastic season. I always joke with people, when you play Tulane, you're playing real students. And
It's a great
we
point.
did it. We had a great season, but it came to an end Saturday. LSU, well, let's just say, looks like they're in a rebuilding mode.
Yeah, the Lane train might not be there 4 or 5 years from now, but it's going to be a wild ride.
We'll
My
see.
last question for you, and I love Louisiana and Louisiana food. If you were visiting New Orleans, favorite restaurant and favorite dish from that restaurant?
Well, there's so many to choose from.
There really are.
My favorite is, you can't go wrong with the old favorites, Antoine's and the Commander's Palace and so forth. But I love one that's in the French Quarter. It's called the Italian Barrel. Doesn't sound like much, an innocuous name. The Italian Barrel. It's on Governor Nichols, I believe. It's a small restaurant, but the food is knockout good. And as far as favorite dish, redfish. I mean, it's hard to top redfish in Louisiana. It's so good. And each restaurant has its own sauce and seasoning and so forth. But that'd be my suggestion if you're from out of town visiting, the Italian Barrel. And I'm not getting anything for it. I'm not getting any commission or anything.
Well, Chip, I really enjoyed talking to you today about malpractice in Louisiana and your nonprofit. Thank you so much for coming. Folks, if you want to learn more about Chip's nonprofit or his law firm, refer to the show notes. And until next time, thank you for listening to Judicial Dollars and Cents. Thanks for joining us on Judicial Dollars and Cents, presented by Anders Virtual CFO Services. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. To learn more about how Anders helps law firms strengthen their financial foundations and drive growth, visit anderscpa.com. Until next time, keep making smart decisions that make perfect sense.